what is the opposite of depression since it's not happiness? That's how you started your book. Literally the first sentence of your preface, I believe. And as we both know, depression's a clusters or multiple different symptoms. Just like happiness is not a single, isolated, independent state, it comprises of different parts of wellness and well-being. So what is the opposite of depression, Ryan, since it's not happiness?
Right. Well, happiness, I think the biggest problem with it is it's such an ambiguous term. It can be used in so many different ways. It can mean momentary pleasure. It can mean deep life satisfaction. And I think depression is a very specific state. I mean, it appears to be a coordinated response of mood and behavior and what are the core elements of depression is what I've sort of asked. Well, yes, there's low mood. Clearly, that's not necessarily a bad mood. It can just be the absence of mood, and a kind of emptiness is very often characteristic of depression. So we've got low mood, we've got low vitality, no energy, no interest, no motivation in doing the things that you previously were interested in. And then you've got low self-regard, which I think is sort of a neglected component of depression, but it's pretty much invariably there. You have a negative view of yourself, low self-esteem. So it's not just being in a bad mood. It's distinct from grief and sadness in that it does come with this self-loathing that's so characteristic of it. So what would be the opposite of that? It's a state of high mood, high vitality, and high self-regard. And this is essentially what I find in the ancient Greek term eudaimonia, this sort of ultimate happiness, you might say, but it's not just regular happiness. It's very specific. It comes from becoming a person that you're proud to be and continually exercising those traits that make you proud of who you are. This is how it was talked about by, like you said, Aristotle and the Stoics, and it really seems to me that this is a continuous scale. There's a scale going from what we might call eudaimonia to what has been termed today as clinical depression at the bottom. And essentially our brains are moving us up and down along this scale based on what they observe in us. And so through our actions, we're signaling to our brains, virtue self-signaling, if you will, what kind of person we are. What kind of person am I today, right? What type of actions am I taking? What kind of traits am I demonstrating? And that's moving us up and down closer to eudaimonia or toward depression.
I had another intrusive thought. Perfectionism kind of popped in my head. And I know a lot of high achievers and thinkers like to use perfectionism as a shield. I think perfectionism is a disguise of your insecurity, right? So like, what are your thoughts on perfectionism? Because whether it's the process of self-becoming, using your words, whether it's the journey of going from a state of depressions to the state of high mood, high vitality, like you said beautifully, where does perfectionism lie? Because Americans love using the word perfectionism and I am a perfectionist like it's a shiny armor of virtue they want to wear around and showcase.
Yeah, no, I've known plenty of real perfectionists, and it's not really a glamorous thing. It's kind of crippling. Yeah, people who are perfectionists generally are not able to get anything done because everything is below their standards. And it's also, emotionally, takes a huge toll on you. I address it, for one, in the anxiety program again, because there's a whole lesson dedicated to this desire to live up to our potential and to perfection and to finally be adequate. And a lot of the beliefs we have to accept when we want to overcome anxiety are just accepting that reality is not going to be perfect and finding a way to embrace that. So we look at like people who need to have control. You have to learn that you don't have control. People who need to have security, you have to learn there's no real security. There's no real permanence. Everything is in flux in your life. And with perfectionism, you have to learn there is no perfection. There's no such thing. And sometimes you have to teach yourself this through experience. So I tell people, like, if you're paranoid about including a typo in your emails and you're going through 10 different times to make sure there's no typos and it's perfect, you need to deliberately put typos and send them to teach your brain that you're not going to achieve perfection and you're not trying to achieve perfection. And so that's the main sort of essence of how I tell people to deal with perfection. But I think also in terms of this book, it plays out in a little bit of a tricky way where we have these schemas or these core beliefs about what we have to be. And it was really interesting. I gave my members attest of your schemas and kind of maladaptive core beliefs. And a lot of people believe they don't have worth if they are not achieving. A lot of people believe they need to be perfect or they're a failure. And these are really, sometimes deeply embedded but distorted ideas. And they can actually prevent you from becoming the best version of yourself. If you're too fixated on being perfect and on achieving your full potential, you'll actually fall short of your potential, because that's just a crippling ideal. You're never going to reach it if you are just so fixated on it. So it's best to just embrace the fact that you are not going to live up to your full potential. You're not going to achieve perfection. Lean into that fact and then do the best you can.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I feel like your thesis of self-becoming is coming back because becoming, ing, applies an active verb. It's an active process. It's a momentum. But how can you have momentum if you don't have any action? Right? I don't want to talk about paralysis by analysis. Everyone and their mothers talk about that term. But it's true though, right? You have to start the actions. And I feel like a lot of people in the West or in America, we have this distorted belief that opportunities demand actions. That's wrong. Actions create opportunities. And that momentum drives you forward more and more. And I really hope that we can flip the narrative, because I feel like everyone's waiting on the perfect one to knock on their door, whether it's romantic relationships or lottery or the perfect job opportunity. But every job starts with applying to the job, and applying to the job requires starting on your resume. So you got to start somewhere, right? But I really do want to highlight the importance of self-grace and self-compassion. If we don't extend the grace for ourselves, how can we possibly extend the grace for others?
Yeah, I think you bring up a good sort of distinction that's often made between being and becoming, the sort of passive versus the active. And there's a lot of debate about which of these sort of approaches or philosophies toward life is better. You've got this sort of Eastern idea that we should just be, we should simply exist passively. We shouldn't try to change ourselves or become more than we already are. Everything is fine as it is. We should approve of ourselves exactly as we are. And there is clearly a lot to like about this philosophy. There's also this more Western idea of becoming and action, and you have to go out and earn things, and you should always be changing and improving and growing more. And I think the problem really here is that we do create a distinction between these, and we make people sort of choose in terms of a philosophy. Really, I think action is huge for sort of earning our own admiration. I talk about, having, summer breaks in school where I would be so excited not to have to go to school and not have to do anything, not have to work. And a lot of people have this mentality today. If I had enough money and I could retire and I didn't have to work and I could just do nothing, that would be great. And it's not really great when you do it. You end up, it turns sour very fast. If you aren't setting goals, if you aren't taking action, you aren't going to feel great, because, and I've argued, you're not going to have a lot of reason to approve of yourself. And so the way we reconcile these two, I think, is that first and foremost, we need to accept ourselves as we are right now in the present. We need to say, I am where I am, right? And we need to set our sights on where we'd like to be, where we would most admire ourselves, break that down into individual steps and constantly strive toward it, but also constantly remind ourselves, I'm okay as I am, right? I'm not, fundamentally flawed just because I'm not, where I ultimately want to be. Because if we were, our perfect selves, we would have nothing left to work for, and that'd be pretty boring. So I do think we shouldn't write off the value of becoming and action, but we also should, like you said, extend self-grace and self-compassion, and sort of be accepting of ourselves one way or another.